Afternoon and welcome. My name is Filip Ivanov. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Asia Society Australia. Welcome to Asia Society and welcome to Deakin University and the Indian School of Business. We're delighted to partner the three institutions today to bring you a public event that we titled Australia and India, New Ideas for the New Normal. Before we begin, we acknowledge that many participants in today's event are dialing from locations that have traditional owners and custodians. Today I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, the land of Boon Wurrung and Wurundjeri people of the East Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their traditional owners of this land and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to welcome and acknowledge any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people joining our webcast today. Today we are honoured to be joined by an expert panel to discuss how talent and innovation can shape the next chapter of Australia-India relations. Australia's relationship with India is growing ever more critical, particularly amidst the changing geopolitical environment. With new realities come challenges, but also new opportunities across the digital, tech and startup space, and particularly among our young demographic. We know that Australia-India relationship has a strong momentum at the moment. The country is committed to building deeper links across economy, security, people-to-people relations. And we think this event is very timely. It's also timely because we are very delighted to present our first public event with the Asia Society Victoria Distinguished Fellow and CEO of Softbank India, Mr. Manoj Kohli, who is a well-respected Indian entrepreneur and business leader, and whose work and expertise is working to generate new ideas and promote greater economic and cultural connectivity between Victoria, Australia, and India. So thanks so much to the team of Deakin and Deakin Southeast Asia, and of course the Indian School of Business for this exciting collaboration. I will now pass over to the Executive Dean of Deakin's Business School, Professor Mike Ewan. Over to you, Mike.
You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry, thank you very much, Philip, and I too pay my respects to the First Nations peoples, both in India and in Australia. This is a very exciting event, I think, for two sets of reasons. I'm very excited. We've had a long-term relationship for the last 6 years with the Indian School of Business, unquestionably the premier business school on the subcontinent, and it's great to have Prakash Bagri from ISB joining us today. I'm very excited that we're doing a collaboration with Asia Society, an organization I've long admired, but this is the first, I think, formal collaboration between Deakin and Asia Society, which is exciting. I'm very excited to have speakers of the caliber of Manoj Kohli, Daizy, Maan, who I've known for a long time as well, Prakash, and of course, my very good friend Ravneet joining us. So we've assembled a great team, and I think we've got very good karma for this webinar. I'm also excited because of the timing and the relationship between Australia and India. It's a long-standing relationship. It goes back, in fact, arguably to the man after whom Deakin is named. Alfred Deakin was a very early pioneer in recognizing the strategic importance of India to Australia. But I like the title, the next chapter of the relationship. I think the relationship has plateaued to some extent, and the timing is opportune to strengthen the relationship and explore the next level of the relationship. And it just so happens that right now we've got COVID, and we've also got a very complex Sino-Australian relationship and a very complex geopolitical environment. Even without that, I think it would be time to take this relationship to the next level. But you add the geopolitics, you add COVID, and it brings a sense of urgency to rethinking what is potentially a very important relationship, certainly for Australia and I hope for India too. So I'm very excited and I can't wait to hear what the panel has to say. I'll hand over to my colleague from the Indian School of Business, Prakash Bagri.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Philip. Good afternoon and good evening, depending upon where you are. Thank you, Asia Society and Deakin, for this collaboration and running this extremely exciting program. Deakin has a long association with ISB and certainly with India, being one of the first business schools, if not the first one, to have actually set up its offices around in India. So over the past decade, we have worked across multiple opportunities of collaboration and partnership. And it is but timely that we're looking at this particular situation to figure out what could be new ideas for the coming days. On behalf of the Indian School of Business, it is my pleasure to welcome Manoj, along with all our other esteemed guests, Ravneet and Daizy, on this panel discussion, and also all the viewers who have dialed in from different parts of the world. As they say, every cloud has its own silver lining, and whereas we are in the midst of an unprecedented crisis of COVID, it does provide a great opportunity for our countries to deepen our association further. Australian cricketers, Australian chefs have always had a very strong association and fandom in India itself. And this is but opportune to see how Australian companies can also partake in terms of the huge opportunity that the Indian market provides and vice versa. India provides a tremendous opportunity for innovation and growth, and hopefully we'll use this time to drive into some of the specifics of what can help in terms of fueling it further. I won't keep you further from what promises to be a very interesting talk from Manoj, and we'll see you all on the other side. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure on behalf of Deakin University to welcome you all on this very exciting panel discussion. I acknowledge the presence of Mr. Philip from the Asia Society, Professor Prakash from ISB, Professor Mike Ewing from Deakin University, Daizy Maan from Deakin University, and of course, our very distinguished guest of honor and speaker, Mr. Manoj Kohli from the Softbank, India, who is also a distinguished fellow of the Asia Society. I wish to convey my gratitude to Asia Society to put this together with Deakin University and for Indian School of Business to have partnered with us for this very innovative and exciting discussion. Both countries have set an ambitious bilateral economic agenda with the first release of Australia's India Economic Strategy in 2035 in 2018 and the upcoming release of India's own Australia Economic Strategy following the virtual summit between our two Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Morrison and Prime Minister Modi in July 2020. Although the momentum across our trading relationship had slowed significantly due to the global health and economic crisis, but current situation with the pandemic and a rapid global digitization has paved the way for new ways of thinking, particularly among our young generations. So what are these ideas to consider as citizens of both countries during these times most of us are considering as the new normal? What are those lessons which both countries can take from each other in these emerging times? And what is the startup ecosystem looking like? What role can the startup sector and the innovative economy sector play in growing mobility of talent, capital, and people between our two nations in ensuring that countries meet their economic commitments? To discuss this, I have with me a distinguished panel today and who would be able to share some light in some of the critical areas. Before I get on to the introduction of the panel, I would just like to state that we will have Manoj speak for a couple of minutes, followed by the panel discussion, and then we will be open to the question and answers from the audience. So let me introduce the panel. I have Daizy Maan, an emerging entrepreneur and founder of the Australian South Asian Centre. She is also the leader of Spark, the innovation hub at Deakin University, Australia. Daizy is a passionate young people's shaping the future focus and social entrepreneurship and represents the Young Australia India conduit. She hosts the Daizy Project, a podcast exploring what it means to live in a purposeful life. At 21, she served on the board of directors for Australia's largest community bank company, and at 22 was appointed as the youngest manager to lead entrepreneurship programs for over 60,000 students through Spark at Deakin University. Welcome, Daizy, an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Our next speaker is Professor Prakash Bagri. He is the Associate Dean Corporate Engagement and Clinical Associate Professor of Marketing at the Indian School of Business. Professor Prakash brings 3 decades of experience across industry and academia, which includes senior leadership positions in Unilever and Intel. His last corporate role was as the Chief Marketing Officer for Intel South Asia. Over the past decade, Prakash extended his influence as advisor and consultant, also donning the role of faculty in leading business schools. His research interests cover innovation, technology, business models, risk and uncertainty, organizational capabilities, and partnerships and alliances. Welcome, Prakash. It's an honor to have you on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not the least, of course, our guest of honor, Mr. Manoj Kohli, Asia Society Australia Distinguished Fellow and Country Head, Softbank India. Manoj supports the interest of Softbank Vision Fund, and their over 20 portfolio companies like Ola, Oyo, Paytm, WeWork, Lenskart in India. Manoj has worked closely with multinationals as well as worked at Michigan, Austria, Tokyo, Shanghai, Manila, Singapore, Hong Kong, and supervised 20 countries in Africa in addition to all 4 regions in India. He is responsible for addressing government and policy-related issues, which will help these companies to achieve their full potential. Manoj brings along a wealth of experience through his global engagement for over 40 years in the corporate environment, including manufacturing and the telecom sector. Manoj, a very warm welcome and thank you for being with us. We are really looking forward to hearing your views. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our panel members and this discussion of how talent and innovation can shape the next chapter of the Australia-India relationship. Over to you, Manoj.
Thank you. Thank you, Ravneet. Thank you to Mike, to Prakash, to Philip. Thank you to Deakin, ISB, and of course, Asia Society. I'm delighted to be with you, and especially the theme, which is so exciting for both our countries. You know, India-Australia partnership, as Mike said, maybe has plateaued, and it's our responsibility to bring it back and help it take off. And that's the firm objective of today. I can say that the environment which, when I started my career, was kind of static, to slowly opening up to become dynamic, and now the economic environment is an environment of constant disruptions. And that is where youth comes in. That is where talent comes in, millennium youth comes in, innovation comes in. And I fully agree with the theme that talent and innovation will shape the next chapter of India-Australia partnership. Youth has new ideas, and I work with more than 20 companies, and all the companies are founded by very young, youthful founders. By the way, some of them are mid-20s, and they're very bright, and they're already billionaires. They're already doing so well, not only in one country, they're already doing well in multiple countries. And innovation, especially digital innovation, is really at the cutting edge now. And I believe that this is a very opportune time to initiate a major economic upswing between Australia and India. Thanks to PM Scott Morrison and PM Modi, I think clearly there is a blessing right from the top for taking this relationship from 3 C's, you know, Commonwealth, cricket, and curry, which I thought was a limiting factor to something which is much, much bigger in future. And let me share some thoughts. I, as chairman of Future Business Group of CII is the biggest Chamber of Commerce of India, and Future Business Group is building future new businesses for India with partners like Australia. We have initiated some sectors. prioritize some sectors where India-Australia partnership can grow and shape a much bigger business for 2025. Let me start that and share with you which are these sectors. First and foremost sector is infrastructure, which includes roads, ports, energy, airports, all those. And India, you'll be surprised to know, has a target of investing 1.4 trillion US dollars in the next 5-6 years. Because infrastructure, the physical infrastructure in India definitely needs massive investments. And this is one area where a lot of Australian companies can come and invest. And I believe it'll be great because all these investments, all these ministries, all these partnerships have been very good in the past. Second is manufacturing. And as you know, supply chains are changing across the world. And India is getting a lot of manufacturing. I just read today about Apple. Apple coming into India in a big way, Tata's and Apple signing together for a major Apple manufacturing facility in South India. So clearly many companies, and every day we are seeing American, Korean, Japanese companies coming here for building supply chain, which is now this supply chain will be great because the domestic market of India is so huge that to satisfy the domestic market itself, it will take time, it will take years before we get on to the exports market. The third area is area of healthcare, which is very critical today, especially after COVID-19. And I believe India has a fantastic foundation of pharmaceutical sector, for example, vaccine. More than 50% of global production capacity of vaccine is in India. So as India will supply to the world, I'm sure the healthcare infrastructure can take help from Australia because Australia's infrastructure is great. And India needs a lot of medical healthcare infrastructural investments. The next one is education. And education in the past between India and Australia have been good. I will say very good start. Not at the level of where India-US is or India-UK is, but definitely can be enhanced significantly. And I'm happy that Mike, Ravneet, and others are really representing that, and I'll be delighted to support them to build because Indian young boys and girls have a lot of positive perception, positive feelings about Australia as a country. So I think this is the right time to leverage that fully. And both ways. In India also, the education sector is just opened up. And I'm sure Australian universities, like many American universities, are thinking of investing in India. The digital part of India is really at the cutting edge. When I was in Airtel, we took the mobile internet to more than 500,000 villages. Today, majority of villages have 4G network. So which clearly means that digital behavior of Indian consumers is already changing in the last 6-8 months. It changed so much, which is equivalent to 10-12 years of change. So the propensity of consumer to go digital rather than offline, go online, is much higher today compared to January of this year. So clearly, digital startups like Softbank has more than 20 in India. I'm sure Australia has many. So there has to be a very high degree of interaction. For example, one of the Softbank companies, Ola, is in Australia gaining good experience, gaining market share, and giving good service to Australian citizens. Another area is minerals and resources, where, for example, EV is a major sector being focused by government and industry in India. And luckily, Australia has lithium, and the Make in India of storage battery is being focused. So I'm sure Australia and India can work together on that. Agriculture. While India agriculture is good, we not only feed our own 1.3 billion population, we also export food items, but still our productivity standards are not that high. So we will need some degree, because Australia is also strong in agriculture, need some automation, some mechanization, so that these productivity standards in India can go up further. Last but not the least, I'll come back to tourism. The tourism where I think both countries are advertising, etc., but still, I feel the proportion of tourism is low, is still low. And I feel that it needs a 2x or 3x growth in the coming 5 years. Government is fully supportive. Government is really both ways, is fully supporting us in all these missions. And one of the targets we have taken in CII is to connect the sectoral CEOs. Each sector by sector, all CEOs should be connected so that they can start the dialogue to get into joint ventures, get into alliances, collaborations, whatever. At the end, I just want to clarify a geographical fact, which many of people don't know, that the distance between Chennai and Perth is closer to Sydney and Seoul, Sydney and Shanghai, and Sydney and Tokyo. So India is not far away. It looks far away, but it's not far away. Our hearts are closer to each other. I think Indians love going to Australia. Indians love, and I'm sure Australians love beating each other in cricket. And they're already the next visit of Indian team is planned to Australia. I think this is a fantastic foundation for us to build on for making a far bigger economic trade and commerce growth in the coming 5 years. Thank you, and back to Ravneet.
Thank you very much, Manoj, for setting the scene so beautifully, and and also just laying down the 5 or 6 key thematic areas where India and Australia can focus its building blocks going into the future. And I do think that the people-to-people linkages between the two countries is the key foundation to growing trade and growing businesses. And I think that the platform that we have today is a very good start to that. So thank you very much for setting the scene. Let me come to you as the first question, Manoj. We'll start the panel. In one of your recent articles, you talked about in the trade between the two countries, between India and Australia, to enhance by 10x. What is the ecosystem around that you see developing between the two countries, and what role can the government play in that?
No, I believe the ecosystem has to be built up strongly at 3 levels. One is government, which, as you said, both the prime ministers, both the governments are now very actively supporting the growth. Second is entrepreneurs. Indian entrepreneurs, Australian entrepreneurs have to meet each other, discuss opportunities, because I've seen in the past, maybe that hasn't happened as much as India, US, India, Japan, India, Korea has happened. So I would like to help it take it to that level where Indian, Australian CEOs and entrepreneurs work together very closely. The third level, as you see, is at professional level. Indian professionals are globally the most, I will say, most active and popular professionals. Many American large corporations are headed by Indian professionals. I think there has to be a very professional level interaction, which also, so if you do these 3 levels of more intense interactions and visits, you will see many more problems can be solved, many more opportunities can be picked up, there'll be knowledge sharing. And I, from CII, once again, and Asia Society, I'm trying to catalyze this as much as I can.
Thank you very much, because I think it's a very important part of what you say. I mean, I think G2G and B2B and then, people to people. I mean, this is the framework of a really robust partnership. And I think that Australia and India need to invest a lot more into all the 3 aspects of engaging this. Let me move on to Professor Prakash. Professor, you are at India's premier business school at the moment. And in your role at ISB, what sort of strategic initiatives are you taking to empower the youth of India and maybe work together with countries like Australia to build a much stronger ecosystem to promote innovation? You're on mute, Professor.
Thank you, Ravneet. At ISB, innovation and entrepreneurship is an integral part of our curriculum. It also is a very high interest area for the youth of today. In order to drive it beyond that, we also have the Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which basically focuses in terms of creating a vibrant ecosystem which can not just create, but also grow enterprises, not just through partnership, but through research, through education, as well as practice. So as a part of CIE, we basically have extensive programs which reach out across cross sections, including a very detailed tribal entrepreneurship program at the grassroots level, while also reaching out to the students in our campuses, as well as across in the closer ecosystem of Telangana and other states in the other colleges. So our whole objective is to basically foster this innovation through coordination between young students, enterprise, as well as investors, and basically lead them in terms of opportunities for creating business, as well as guide and mentor them in terms of creating those businesses and growing it forward for success. Having said that, we also work at the corporate entrepreneurship level, and we basically help a lot of organizations in terms of fostering the innovation culture within themselves and helping them partner with entrepreneurs at the grassroots level as well as at the industry level in order to create new business enterprises. We do see entrepreneurship as a very critical aspect in terms of delivering growth, and therefore it is a very important aspect of our own focus.
Great, thank you very much. And I do see that in coming times, with all the work that's happening in institutions like yourself, we will see a much more vibrant culture to promote innovation into the ecosystem. Daizy, let me just come to you here. You've served as the youngest director in Australia's largest community bank. You've held several important positions, worked in the higher education sector, and also looking at a lot of startups. What, according to you, are the actual challenges and where do you see the opportunities for the young, both in India and in Australia?
I think one of the biggest challenges still lies in our mindset. Young people are still looking for a traditional job. They're still looking for secure employment, and things are changing drastically. COVID has accelerated that pace of change. So what I'm noticing is there needs to be a huge shift in mindset for young people and also for our universities and institutions to realize that the future of work is likely to be, like what Manoj pointed out, digital work, online work, freelancing, launching startups, but those two are different. So I'd say one of the biggest challenges we have, which is also in and of itself an opportunity, is changing the mindset of young people and opening their perspective, because there's years and years of conditioning of you will do this degree, you will get this job, you will have security and stability. And, COVID has just taught us what is security and stability when it comes to income, when it comes to a job. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges and opportunities. And I think there are organizations working on this, but not at the pace. I think we really need to lift that. When I spent a few months earlier in Punjab this year, interviewing, talking to people on the ground, understanding their prospects, a lot of young people waiting to go abroad, right? And for the ones not going abroad, they're not getting job opportunities. There's 500 million young people in India. If we can even fathom, Australia's population is around 25 million, 500 million young people in India. What are they going to do? Not all of them are going to become startup founders, but I think many of them will need digital literacy skills. That's not just how to use TikTok. I think that's how do I start building sites? How do I build a business online? How do I strengthen my ambition? And another big challenge I have to mention is of gender equality. I think one of the reports, a DFAT economic report released by the Australian government, was phenomenal with so much consultation. One of the big things it said is India will not reach its full potential if women do not have the same opportunities there. So it's got one of the lowest participation rates in the workforce for women in the OECD. So I think we need to recognize that. Often women are still, even when they start a business, their bank account is in their husband's name. All the financial matters are in their husband's name, or their partners, or their parents. So I think this financial empowerment and financial independence, financial literacy is also a challenge. And it's something we need to work towards in empowering women as well.
Absolutely. And I think that, very well said. I mean, I think women empowerment is a very important part of growth for any economy, and especially with a large number in India. I think we really need to provide that ecosystem. So Manoj, the economic strategies both between India and Australia are strengthening. There is a lot of commitment and there is a lot of facilitation for capital and for ideas to grow. How do you see the startup sector contributing to this, and is it showing any promise in your view as we speak?
Startup system in India per se is today the fastest growing sector. It's all tech focused, it's all AI focused. I believe that Australia also has a similar enthusiastic startup situation. But I think the interaction is not there. I think the exposure is not there. And I think that's really a bad news, because why is the exposure not there? I think it's our responsibility to initiate that. I feel that top 25 startups of India, and I'm already initiating this with Asia Society and CII, should be exposed. I actually, one of our portfolio companies, Ola, encouraged when they had a thought of going out of India, and Australia was the first step Ola took to go, and then they went to New Zealand and the UK and now Canada, etc. So the point I'm making is that there is a knowledge gap which we need to fulfill very fast, because there are a lot of digital startups in India which can benefit Australia's growth. Same applies to Australian. Let's say the top 10 of Australia, we should earmark and expose them to the huge Indian market. And can they come here on their own? Can they come here as a joint venture or work with another entrepreneur in India? How can this happen? I think we just have to connect the dots as early as possible. We also have to get entrepreneurs to get together regularly. Because frankly, till the entrepreneurs get together, sit down, discuss opportunities, this connecting the dots will not happen. So that is one of the major efforts we will initiate now.
Yeah. So Manoj, since you do wear multiple hats, and you sort of are leading Softbank, but you're also wearing this hat of Asia Society and CII, can you tell us the 2 or 3 things that you think will happen in the near future for the benefit of our viewers, so they can take a note of that and make sure that they can be inclusive and participative in building these blocks of the Australia-India relationship? Can you tell us about the 2 or 3 key initiatives that you think will come up in the next couple of months?
No, I feel digital is definitely a high priority of both the countries. So I think this initiative we have already talked about, and now we have to put into action. Just because of COVID and travel restrictions, I think we haven't actioned it. But I think in maybe 3 months to 6 months, all this will be actioned. So 21 is a big action time for digital in both the countries. The second area, as I said, is major investment opportunities in infrastructure. Now, how many countries in the world will have infrastructure plan for $1.4 trillion? How many countries? I mean, I don't think anyone in the world is having such a major. So I don't think that exposure is there in Australia. So I am initiating through CII and Ministry of Finance that exposure, so that a lot of entrepreneurs in Australia who are infrastructure related, energy related, renewable energy especially, should be welcome into Indian market. The third area is manufacturing, as I said. Very, very major focus in India. Indian government is giving incentives to electronics, to medical equipment, and many other sectors where they're encouraging entrepreneurs to come and seek market, but also for exports into Middle East, Africa, etc., and Asia, of course. So these could be the top 3 initiatives on the business side. Yes, on the people side, it'll continue with tourism, continue with cricket, continue with Bollywood, and many other areas. But I think I would like to personally focus much more on the business side, because that is something where opportunities are much more.
Great, thank you very much. And of course, Australia has earmarked all manufacturing as one of the key aspects and growing sectors within Australia as well. And I think the government is committed to actually growing that sector. So there are immense opportunities between the 2 countries to look at manufacturing infrastructure and the whole digital space. Coming to you, Prakash, India does have a unique startup landscape with immense opportunity and scalability. How is it different? And if you were to talk to our colleagues from Australia, what would you say to them is the key reason to look at India vis-a-vis other countries? What is the uniqueness about India that we bring on board?
See, the first point about India, which has been really well established, is the sheer size of it. So it's size from a market as well as it's a size from a talent. And I think Manoj did touch upon the aspect of Indian talent being an integral part of global corporates as well as the global startup ecosystem. So it certainly provides a ready market to accelerate the pace of any startup's growth. Having said that, the other important aspect of India, which perhaps doesn't get addressed as much as India is the best periscope possible in terms of what are opportunities for the larger part of the global population. So if you have to basically understand what are the requirements for a developing market, there is no better test market than India itself. Because India is not really one homogeneous market, and the kind of opportunities which you get depending upon the cross section, the different cultures, the different areas and locations is for a startup to really mushroom. And it's these products and services which then get created, which find a ready market in other parts of the world also. The third aspect, which becomes very critical from a startup ecosystem, is given India's own stage of development and the fact that infrastructure is at a different level, the kind of solutions which you create are quite unique compared to the solutions which you would create from a developed market standpoint. For example, take how we basically created mobile payments. So one of the advantages which the digital environment provides us is we don't really need to be dependent upon the legacy roadmap in order to arrive at a particular stage. And the Indian market with top-notch digital infrastructure at the same time with challenges of physical infrastructure provide a different accelerated mode of harnessing innovation and making it relevant for other markets. And so to that extent, I would say the combination of these factors makes India really attractive for not just the local market itself, but also in terms of creating products and services which have relevance across a much broader cross-section.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments. And I think that, what COVID has taught us that one can do business, maybe not to the extent that we would have liked to, but one can continue to do business digitally as well. So I would say that not waiting for, things to open up, we should start initiating more dialogues and more interactions, even digitally while we speak between our two nations to foster the economic growth between our two countries, even in these pandemic and difficult times. Let me come to you, Daizy. You lead Spark at Deakin University, and which is a hub for young talent. Can you think of a really interesting case study or an example that you think you can talk about to our audience, which you think provided the digital technology and education institution base and success, which came out of that between the two countries, which gives a platform for our colleagues in this forum to think about how this can be featured in action in their parts of the world?
I think in thinking about that, I think with Spark specifically, one of the startups that's been really interesting, which you may be familiar with, is one called Lemonade. Because the founders, there's one in the US, Casey's in the US, ours is doing his MBA or his master's in Australia at Deakin. And then I think you've also got one of the founders, I think is in Europe and France somewhere, but two of them are from India and they have more team members in India as well. And they've built a sort of like a social, I guess it's a social media application where they bring brands and events and online experiences. Originally, they were founded before COVID. So to see them pivot and change has been phenomenal. And for them to you know, they first came into our program, I think they knew a lot of things, but then they were very humble and they learned where their shortcomings were through our accelerator program. But I think that as an example is phenomenal. This team from day one has been remote, right? So the way Casey talks about this team, I think is really, they've embedded a remote work culture from the beginning. So it can be done. You can have founders across the world and still develop your startup. And I think Lemonade is a good case study. I think in general, in terms of when we look at this space, like Manoj said as well, we do need to build more relationships with young entrepreneurs. For example, I think symbolism does not necessarily equate representation. And I think we need to remember that, because we can't just say young people, the youth, and then we give them a seat. We give them a seat at the table, and then when they want to have some power or make a decision, we're like, shush, shush, you're just here for the photo opportunity. I think it's really important that we actually give young people a voice. And unfortunately, that does often involve giving up some power and some control for the older generation. You know, India is a country where it's a lot of older people are in positions like youth ministers and heads of companies. So when I was there earlier this year, and I went to a lot of panel events, I went to startup competition. One was run by Startup Jalsa. I think they had 500 applicants across India. And the panel, everyone was probably a male over 55. So if we want young people, we need to give them a seat at the table. And this is one of the reasons when I started a sort of a social impact project last year, Bold Punjab, I did an event. Everyone on the panel was young. We had two women and 2 young men, and they were doing phenomenal work. But it's not often. When I spent 2 months I was specifically in Punjab looking for young people, particularly women, in these leadership roles. They were not easy to find. And it's interesting where the institutions and the organizations that hold power are not necessarily giving them a seat at the table. So I think that is something that we need to look at as well, and always with the gender lens, because we can't become what we can't see. If I ask young people in India who's Priyanka Chopra, they're all going to know. If I ask them name one female founder from India, homegrown, self-made, they're not going to name someone.
Yeah.
And if I say, think of your entrepreneur, it's usually an American entrepreneur they think of. So I think
Now you make a really good point. I think we need to be more visible. We need to be more inclusive, and definitely gender equality is on the cards. Manoj, picking up from Daisy's point, you know, what public policies do you think are really needed? And also, especially if we can focus that towards the Australia-India partnership to foster, a good ground for more young people to enter into the startup sector. One point that you did make was, of course, the visibility and the understanding. But what are some of the policies that you think we should be looking towards to building this ecosystem between our two countries?
No, first, let me congratulate Daisy. She makes a very, very good point. And at Softbank, let me assure you that we really respect young people. And that's why entrepreneurs who are just over 20, maybe 25, less than 30, are all running their large-scale businesses. And they are fully empowered. Softbank normally doesn't interfere in day-to-day business at all. We, of course, are on the board, etc. But I think there is a respect for young people. There's a respect for their abilities and competence. So, which is very important. Which otherwise, youth will not gain in conviction and confidence to grow. Now, public policies do not stop any such interface. But by the way, I mean, today you can't say that there's a public policy which is holding back this interface, because startup sector is not a regulated sector except for the personal and non-personal data privacy, etc. Except for those few aspects. Otherwise, it's not a regulated sector. But public policies today, which could further catalyze this interaction between Australia and India, could be in the area of culture, because Ministry of Culture, for example, I think they prioritize countries. Australia should be a serious priority in that list. Education, as I said, it's opening up. I'm sure many good Australian universities can set up shop here in India. Good policies. Tourism, definitely much more, advertising of India to Australia or Australia to India, which is already happening, but maybe we can expand it further. Youth interaction, as Daisy said, much more is required, because I don't see many youth formalized policy on interaction happening. I think this can definitely be picked up very well. So I think there are some public policies which can be done, but I'm saying by and large, it is left to people. I mean, there is no holdback, policy level holdback on this. I feel that we as people who are catalyzing it in the industry, in the business, in the social organizations, we should really encourage this now.
We will open to questions from our participants. And the first question that I'm going to take is again coming on to the point about this is talking about what are we doing in India to ensure women are taking part and feeling secure in the startup sector. I think Manoj, you're in the best position to answer this. Specifically to India and specifically to ensuring gender equality and women in the entrepreneurship space.
I think you're right. The entrepreneurial percentage of women is low. There are people like Naika, Falguni Naya, and many others who are really doing a great job. But as a percentage, it will be low. But professionals, women professionals in the digital sector, startup sector is very high. So at the professional level, I think its diversity is healthy. But at the entrepreneurial level, Daisy was absolutely right that it's low, and we have to really encourage that part. And I feel that government is definitely promoting it. The PM personally is promoting it. There is a Startup India program. There are many programs which have been initiated by government, but it's not government. I think all of us have to do it. We can't leave everything to government. I feel that many women are very young women, especially very bright, very entrepreneurial mind, understanding ideas, etc., but find it difficult to do financial management, raising funding, etc., etc. And we all have to really be much more sensitive to that. So much higher degree of sensitivity, much higher degree of empathy has to be there to get this balance right.
Sure, thank you. A question comes, what do you think are the 2 or 3 impediments to increasing the trade between Australia and India? I mean, all 3 of you can answer this if you want, but from different perspectives, I think. Maybe Manoj can answer it from a corporate perspective, and Daisy, you can perhaps answer it from an on-the-ground perspective, with Prakash coming in from the education side.
I think one of the things is, like we've talked about a bit more, symbolism doesn't equate representation. So we need more young, hungry, ambitious, entrepreneurial people in these sort of CEO forums we're having, board forums, because they've got the hunger to do this thing. I think a lot of these conversations between India, Australia, bilateral trade are being had at a level that aren't very accessible to young people. I was part of a forum recently called Australia India Youth Dialogue. I think they are doing phenomenal work in this space, bringing together young leaders from India and Australia. And that was my first time, although I am Indian and I'm part of the diaspora, I was born here, but I'm Punjabi. That was the first time I opened my eyes to the opportunity in India. I'd never seen it that way. I mean, we go back every year, somebody gets married, we go to the Pind, we eat a lot of food, but it never occurred to me that maybe I could be involved at a business level. And ever since going to that, I've launched a number of small businesses and social enterprises, and we have 50% of the women in our program are from India. So I think it's, again, young people, gender representation at this level. And I think it's making sure that these dialogues and all the bilateral efforts, the people there have a lived experience. So if you're going to talk about entrepreneurship, I do think someone needs to be in the room who has been on the ground building ventures in India and Australia and has done it successfully, rather than just policy. I think we need that representation at the table so we understand the practical implications and the actual difficulties on the ground.
Sure. Prakash, any thoughts and comments?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of broad base it a bit. I think one of the challenges which we face is when we try to paint India with one brush. And the important thing which you have to realize is that there are multiple different Indias which we are talking about. For example, as Manoj said, are we really seeing that kind of a challenge of diversity in terms of a professional workforce? And you really, we have a roster of who's who in terms of women CEOs in this country. At the same time, is India a great investment opportunity? It is, because if you really look at it, 1 out of 3 Fortune 500 companies has a global capability center based out of India. So, to that extent, are we presenting the full picture of what is the Indian market around? And on the other hand, if you look at these areas which are anyway heavily competitive, and you see a lot of rush and a lot of competition for human capital at that end. At the same time, I think Manoj earlier on talked about some of the sectors, and it's important to figure out what sectors would be sectors of importance to basically catalyze this engagement between Australian and Indian businesses. And I do see some common themes which could have a much deeper possibility, not just infrastructure or natural resources. For example, there's a lot to learn in terms of agriculture from Australia. And that has greater implications in the Indian context. You know, one of the downsides of the Indian entrepreneurial startup ecosystem is it is still quite metro intensive. And so to that extent, we're basically talking about 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe at best 10 different cities. It's a different matter that Bangalore, Mumbai, and the national capital region figure in the top 20, top 30 startup ecosystems of the world. But what really happens to the masses inside? And we are recently out of a really intense migrant crisis. So are there ways in terms of really picking up from what you have in Australia, ensuring that we are able to build these businesses, we are able to create entrepreneurial ecosystems beyond our metro cities, and to that extent, really create some kind of a collaboration which is long-standing, because we are bringing in the next layer of value over here. Because if you're not, then you're effectively competing with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is already here.
Yeah.
So I think it goes down to basic business and marketing sense as to where do I create this distinction. And just the last point I would like to add over there, similarly for Australian businesses, etc., you have this huge Indian diaspora. You have we provide the second largest cross section of students into Australia. But beyond that, what? How are we going to drive this engagement further?
Sure. You make a very good point on that, I think, about what is niche about the Australia-India relationship and what can we do to build on that. Manoj, there's a question from the participation into the panel about, are Indian sort of venture capitalists likely to invest in Australian businesses working in India? And if yes, how can we foster that engagement?
The answer is yes. The only thing is that the first is the prioritization. In the past, the prioritization has been low because there are many other countries which are fighting for the top 5, top 10 slots. And second is intense interaction and visits. Because I feel that both the young managers, young professionals and entrepreneurs will love to interact, love to share opportunities, but also make investments. If an Australian startup company firm comes here with a great idea, which is mass idea, because any idea which is affordable idea will be great for India. Let me tell you, India needs a lot of affordability ideas in any sector. Look at any sector. I mean, look at Lenskart. Lenskart is one of our companies, eye care. I mean, it is affordable eye care, and that's why it's gone into small towns, as Prakash was saying, small towns, villages of India. So if it is affordable idea, I'm sure Indian VCs will invest in that idea. Why should they not? Because it will grow very well in it.
So I guess this is for the Australian people that, businesses that are listening to us, that India is a very attractive and intense and a scalable market. So if you've got some good ideas and if you are looking at doing business with India, do come and talk to, come and talk to us, come and talk to CII and come and talk to various platforms that can help you establish better business connections and ties with India for scalability of your products and services. Because like Manoj said, this is the time that India needs a lot of innovation and a lot of startup initiatives, both within India, in partnership, in collaboration, and with direct investment and focus. We've got the last 5 minutes, unfortunately. I am really enjoying this discussion, and I don't think we had enough time, but we've got the last 5 minutes. So I'm just going to ask each one of you to give us your 2 points about what you would like to leave us and the people that are listening to this, your 2 last minute thoughts. Let's start with you, Daisy.
Sure. I think you put me on the spot there. But my last 2 thoughts for this is if you're listening, tuning into this, and you are entrepreneurial, which you probably are, and that's why you're here, or you're interested in this, I think it's worth thinking about looking for examples of young entrepreneurs who are doing phenomenal work across these 2 countries and learning from them. I think it's about being humble and not trying to reinvent the wheel. There is so much that has been done. My work with the Australian Digital Job Accelerator, which I recently launched to, and we had 190 women apply across India and Australia. We have 49 students going through it, teaching them how to do freelancing. That would not have happened if I hadn't looked at other models. Some models that I think that are inspiring is something called Leap Club outside of Bangalore. They've recently raised money. There's Young India Foundation run by Sudhanshu Kaushik out of the US. I think the representation work they're doing is phenomenal. And Janavi Tak, who is a volunteer there and also one of our students. And the last one I'll mention, he was on the panel for our Bold Punjab event, is Amitoz, and he's running a startup hub in Chandigarh. And he's, again, studied in the US, but gone back to India. So I think even if you've studied in a foreign country in Australia, I think we need to put those people on a pedestal who go back and they develop relationships and they continue to be entrepreneurial. Because too often the narrative for, especially for Australia to study here, is PR. Like, I'm going to study for a PR. Whereas I know more of the folks going to America, I will study and then I will come back and run a successful business. So I think for us to shift this narrative, the lesson for ourselves as well is to start highlighting the narratives of people who do come here, but also who take the skills, the networks, and build a successful startup in India, because I think they will do phenomenal things and will be the young leaders that take India into a future that is equitable.
Thank you, Daisy. Absolutely. And I totally agree with you that it is about, contributing back to the communities we live in and also bringing out the ideas from wherever you get them. But also, I think a point that you make is that there is a role for education institutions to play. And I think what Deakin University does through Spark and under your leadership is brilliant, because it does provide that platform for young talent to grow between the 2 countries. Prakash, your last thoughts.
Yeah. I would have 3 messages for any entrepreneur looking at India. There is a market over here which is huge, and try to identify opportunities through which you solve basic problems. Look beyond the crowded space. There's ed tech, there is AI, there's ML, but look at areas which can help in terms of expanding solutions which solve basic problems. And that also helps you in terms of creating your own niche in the local market. The second thing is, this is not a market where any solution can be force-fitted. There are unique characteristics of the market, and it also provides a great opportunity to create solutions which are replicable and which are expandable across to the larger world outside. So to therefore look at it as an opportunity to really create something which is innovative, which basically provides wings to your entrepreneurial journey. And the third thing, I think the point which has been emphasized across this, what it calls for is a much higher level of people-to-people engagement. We have seen it happen in the social environments. We have seen it happen in the cultural environments. We've seen it happen in the educational environments. I think there is a need in the business environment for that people-to-people interaction to really start on a much more accelerated basis.
Thank you very much, Prakash. Absolutely, totally agree with you. Social, economic, and human capital are the 3 that we need to build on. And I think India is absolutely an amazing place for that to happen. And we are really looking forward to working more closely. Manoj, coming on to you, and I think the viewers are, have really gained a lot from having all 3 of you. But we are really looking for words of wisdom from you.
Thank you, Ravneet. My two thoughts which are actionable, immediate thoughts. First is during the next cricket team's visit, which is being planned, and I read it yesterday, I will request a big concurrent plan for digital startup entrepreneurs who can actually travel to Australia, interact with major Australian entrepreneurs in top 3, top 4 cities of Australia, along with the cricket, because I think then it becomes a very fun as well as business trip. And young people, when they meet, it will be great. And I'll request maybe Asia Society to think of building such a program for young digital entrepreneurs of India and Australia to interact in 4 or 5 cities of Australia. So here I request Philip and Alois to note this point. I think we can action this very well. Second is that we can do it the same in Australia. Bring a lot of Australian industrial entrepreneurs for 3, 4 major sectors where Australia has strength. Australia has strength in agriculture. Australia has strength in resources. Australia has strength in manufacturing and infrastructure, especially energy. So these 3, 4 sectors where Australia is strong, we can bring them over, and I'll get CII to invite them and come here for a period of a week, arrange all the intense interaction with the respective CEOs of Indian same sectors. And I'm sure in that 1 week, a lot of positive culmination of joint ventures, alliances, collaborations will happen. So I think I'll at least initiate these 2 specific actions very soon.
Fantastic. I love the enthusiasm and I love the actionable items. And can I say on behalf of, I have my dean here, and I know my vice chancellor will be very happy. Can I say on behalf of Deakin University that we would be very, very happy to partner with you on the delivery of these 2 initiatives. And I do know that the Indian School of Business, will also be very keen to host and partner these wonderful initiatives between the 2 countries. I also know that we have Michelle Wade from the Victorian government, and I know that she is listening to me because she's been showing me a beer glass that she's sitting with. So I do know that the Victorian government will be very keen to support these initiatives, because I think the aim is the same for everyone: more engagement, more outcome, and more collaborations between our 2 countries. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for being on this panel. I've really enjoyed talking to you all, and there are some great ideas that have come out of this. I'd like to thank the Asia Society, and I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Mike, for his conclusion and closing remarks.
Oh, thank you, Rav. You've started all the thunder. That was a sensational session. It exceeded my expectations. Thank you to everybody on the panels, and thank you to everybody who participated. And I agree with you, Rav. I think we've got to make this more than a talk fest and try and get action, because a lot of things in life come down to timing, and the timing is very opportune. The timing is really good to try and take this relationship to the next level. So I agree with you. I'm very excited about the potential. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day. Stay safe. Good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you, Elise, and thank you, Andrew, as well.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.